Hi guys, and welcome back to another Genshin Impact video. Yes, despite my main being a white-haired, lightning-wielding, spear-using general voiced by Alejandro Saab, this is not Genshin. Honkai Star Rail, Hoyoverse's newest venture. This game is a futuristic, sci-fi-esque gacha game with turn-based combat, very different to Genshin's open-world combat mechanics. You play as the Trailblazer, a human woken up by these two on a massive space station. They create you, explain nothing, then leave, and they're not seen for like another 15 hours of gameplay. After saving the entire space station, you join the Nameless on the Astro Express, who go around saving planets from these world-ending things called Stellarons. We happen to have one of these inside of us for some bizarre reason, but I really can't be asked to go over the lore in this video, and because I don't want to spoil anything, I'll be talking about the game's mechanics. The good, the bad, and the questionable. Just a pre-warning, this video is going to be a two-parter. I was going to have one long video, but I didn't account for how long this script would be. But without further ado, enjoy. There are a few main mechanics in Star Rail I'm going to go over in this video. We have the combat, the character's elements and the equivalent to weapons, the game modes, exploration and how the open world works, character building, and of course the gacha. And I think the combat is the best place to start, as it's probably the biggest part of the game. In almost direct contrast to Genshin's open world combat, Star Rail takes on a turn-based RPG style combat. And when I heard the combat was like this in the game, I was pretty hesitant to try it, as I'm not the biggest fan of combat like that. The only ones I've been invested in are the Persona games, and a few Final Fantasy ones, and Pokemon, but more so the older Pokemon games because the new ones are kind of mid. When I got into Honkai, I was pleasantly surprised with how much I enjoyed it. Usually turn-based combat games need to have really good worlds and characters, or just damn good combat for me to get invested into it, and if I was to strip it down to the basics, it's very simple. You have your normal attacks, these cost nothing. The skills, these cost skill points, which are gained by using normal attacks. Then you have the ultimate. You gain energy for it by attacking enemies or supporting teammates with both normal attacks and skills. And when you have full energy, the ultimate will either hit one enemy, all enemies, buff or heal one ally, or can give you damage reduction to make your gimmicks. Every enemy also has two health bars, a shield and then their actual health. The shield bar can be damaged by doing certain damage types in order to break the bar. When this bar is depleted, they'll be stunned and unable to act until their next turn. When the meter refills, you must deplete it again. The other one is their actual health. Not much to this, it's your standard. When it gets to 0, the enemy dies. Certain tanks also deal status effects. Ice can freeze, stopping actions and dealing damage. Wind can cause wind shear, dealing wind damage over time. And physical can inflict bleed, so on and so forth. Every enemy can also deal the respective status effects, however that's not really a surprise. Instead of just dealing damage over time, certain enemies will have an attack that can only affect characters who have a status effect. For example, one enemy will inflict wind shear, then its next attack will lock on to every character that has wind shear effect. Some enemies can also taunt characters. This is nothing new to turn-based RPGs, as it's seen in a lot of them. All it does is lock on to the one enemy that taunted you, unless the attack hits an ally, buffing them or healing them, or it hits every enemy. Outside of combat, there are a few things you can do before a battle. You can perform a quick single attack, which the character does respective damage type, so an electro character will deal electric damage to an enemy. And if they're weak to that, they will start the battle with the part of the enemy's shield broken. Each character also has a technique skill these can do. Some of these are just another attack that can initiate battle, others are a heal or damage buff, and then some are unique. A good example of this is Xingyuang's. His fun combat mechanic is the Lightning Lord. Using his skill in combat will cause it to hit more times when its turn in combat comes around. The Lightning Lord will always start with 3 hits, but using his technique before entering combat, it will start with 5, greatly increasing the damage output when its turn comes around. Speaking of Xingyuang, I should probably mention how follow-up attacks work. These are attacks that happen when a set criteria is met. Usually when a character gets hit, a follow-up attack will occur, like with March and Clara. Others work a bit differently. Xingyuang's, as I mentioned, is its own entity in combat and has its own turn that can come around. Its hits can be increased by Xingyuang, as I mentioned, by using his skill and his ultimate, but he cannot manually trigger the follow-up attacks. It only happens when its turn comes around. Another unique example is Himiko's. When she gets charge stacks when you break an opponent's shield, it gains a charge, as the name would imply. And then once you have 3 charge stacks, the next ally to hit an opponent, she would automatically perform a follow-up attack, dealing fire damage. Now, after reading 6 paragraphs of wording to do with combat, let's get into some of the mechanics that heavily affect combat. Similarly to Genshin, Star Rail has 7 elements used in combat. Physical, yes, that's considered an element for some reason. Fire, ice, lightning, and wind, all pretty standard elements. Then we have quantum, one of the more unique ones, and finally imaginary. Imaginary is like the danger in this game at the moment, only having one playable character that can actually deal that damage type, being Welt. Each character has one of these elements, and every enemy is usually weak to one or two of them, dealing specific damage types to cause their shield to break while into the weakened state, as I mentioned earlier. Every element can also deal damage over time when an enemy is damaged on their health with a specific element after breaking their shield. Each element has one and it will deal respective damage types over time until it's removed. Physical can inflict bleed, fire inflicts burn, ice inflicts freeze, this also immobilizes the opponent, lightning inflicts shock, and wind inflicts wind shear. Quantum inflicts entanglement. This one is a bit more unique as it doesn't deal damage over time like the rest. It deals quantum damage on the enemy's next turn, and this damage can be increased over time by hitting an opponent who has the effect. If they don't die by the next turn, they take an increased amount of quantum damage. Side note, the glitch effect on the enemy who has this effect shakes faster than what damage the debuff will inflict, I think. This might just be a visual timer, but I'm pretty sure I'm correct. And lastly, Imaginary inflicts imprisonment. This is like the frozen status, dealing damage over time imaginary damage, and giving the enemy a delayed reaction and speed reduction. Speed is a stat I forgot to mention in the combat section. It's basically a stat that will determine the turn order. Higher speed means that character will be first, and the lower the speed, that character will be last. Enemies also have a speed stat, but heavier units are more likely to be slower than the smaller ones who have a higher speed stat. Unlike Genshin, this game does not have weapons. It has the things called paths and light cones. Now, light cones I won't bother mentioning yet, I'll save that for the character building segment, but paths I will talk about now. Each path is overseen by an Eon, like an Archon. They represent each path. Characters have different paths depending on their playstyle. Every character has one except the Trailblazer, who can change their element and their path together, similar to the Traveler's gimmick. Each character's path also affects what light cone they can equip. An easy way to explain to this is, a polearm character in Genshin cannot equip a greatsword, and a destruction character cannot equip a hunt light cone, except they can equip it, but they won't get the buff from it. They'll just get the basic HP attack and defense stats. So it's basically pointless. Each path also has a typical playstyle attached to it. Now there are 18 paths that have been mentioned in the game, but 7 of them are playable, and I'm going to tell you each one is what they're good at and what characters are on it. The destruction characters usually have great survivability and damage potential. They're very all-round. This path has the characters Hook, Clara, Arlen, the physical Trailblazer, and soon Blade when he gets released. The Hunt characters have very high single target damage. Usually all their skills will only hit one opponent, and they're typically very good at killing tanks. This path has Danheng, Sealer, Sushang, and Yanqing. Erudition are probably my favourite characters. Yeah, I'm biased because my main is on this path, but whatever. These characters deal a great amount of damage to all targets, great at killing swarms of weaker enemies, weakening big enemies, and just do a lot of damage in general. This path has Herta, Himeko, Xingyuan, and Qingque? Sorry if I said that wrong. And Serval. Harmony, while being one of the simpler paths, is easily one of the best. They're the buffers. They make your big numbers get bigger. This path has Asta, Bronya, Tingyun, and soon to be Yukong when she gets released. In direct contrast to Harmony, we have Nihility. These are the debuffers. They're a good pairing with Harmony as they can also make big numbers bigger by making enemies weaker. They can also improve your team's survivability by making enemies deal damage less. Dealing less damage. This path has the characters Pela, Sampo, Welt, Silverwolf, now she's released, and soon to be Kafka. Kafka's a pretty unique one though, as she seems to be more a DPS Nihility path than a debuffer. But that's just me making a guess based on when you get to use her at the start of the game. Mentioning survivability, we have Preservation next. This is the defense path. They give shields to your characters to make them die less. Very helpful, very simple. This path has the characters March 7th, Gepard, the File Trailblazer, and soon to be Fushang. Despite how little the characters there are on this path, it's very helpful. March has a follow-up attack mechanic if a shielded character gets hit, and Gepard can give a shield to everybody. Finally, we have the Path of Abundance. These are super basic. It's the healers. Every RPGB has them. They heal, they stop you from dying. Simple as that. Path has the characters Natasha, Bailu, and when he comes out later, Luocha. And luckily you do get Natasha for free, so you won't be without a healer forever in the game. That segment was very long, so now I'll talk about the game modes you can actually play in the game. In Star Rail, there are a few game modes you can tackle for rewards and entertainment. There's the normal open world. You do the main story here, side quests, companion quests, events, and pretty much every form of exploration. I won't talk about the open world in its own segment, so I won't mention it much here in massive detail, but you can also access every other game mode from the open world. The other two game modes to mention are the Simulated Universe and the Forgotten Hall, and there's also domains. The Forgotten Hall is the equivalent to the Spiral Abyss, and it's accessed from being inside the Astro Express. The Astral Express. You go in with a team of your characters, each floor having its buff, like more of a specific damage type or more ultimate damage. When you enter a battle, using to fight one elite enemy, or maybe a past story boss with some random units on it. And usually there's two phases. You will have just a swarm of bad enemies, they're really weak, they're super easy to kill. Then you'll have the boss enemy. It also has two types of stages, Memory, the normal mode, and Memory of Chaos, that features slightly higher difficulty in content and rewards that get updated periodically. This is me reading that off the wiki, I have not gotten there yet. You also get some basic rewards like EXP materials and weapon XP, and you get 100 crystals for wishing every 3 stars you get. Unlike Genshin, how it has you complete floors in a set time to get the stars, Star Rail has you complete fights in a set number of turns. It's the same premise of beating the floor as fast as possible, but because combat works differently, they changed the functionality of it. The Forgotten Hall also has a store. By completing floors, you get these crystals called Lucent Afterglow, and these are obtained by Forgotten Hall and the equivalent of weekly bosses, which are called Memories of War, and they allow you to purchase a select few set of 4-star light cones. The much more interesting variant of the game mode would be the Simulated Universe, a roguelike-esque game mode where you fight through generated areas you've explored, fighting previous enemies, getting buffs and rewards all the way to the end where you fight a boss. They'll finish the world and you get some rewards. If your team wipes, you fail and you need to start all over again. Personally, I love roguelikes. I've played a lot of Risk of Rain, Hades, Isaac, just to name a few, and this mechanic in a game like this is really cool. It sets out in worlds, 6 in total, where you go through a series of small areas fighting enemies appropriate to that area. So being in the Great Mine was primarily spawn vagrants and robots, being in Belobog's Fragmentum area will spawn Silvermane guards and Fragmentum enemies, so on and so forth. At the end of each area there is one harder enemy and then some portals, acting almost like a mini-boss guarding the exits. There'll be another domain portal simply taking you to the next area, a rest area, which allows you to heal, get your technique points back, upgrade your blessings with Herta. You can also get more members from your party if one of them's died here, or revive a fallen one, but you have to get a certain rank on this skill tree to get the revive. There are also occurrence areas. These have interactable objects, I don't really know how to explain this thing, and you can get some blessings, cosmic fragments which are used to buy and upgrade blessings, and curios from doing little challenges, sitting through some dialogue, or you just take a chance to. There are also elite portals. These take you to a mini-boss and nothing else. There will also always have a rest portal at the end, which will always take you to one of the rooms that you can heal, buy things, revive, bring new pies back, stuff like that. Finally, there's the boss portals at the end. These are similar to the mini-boss ones as they take you to the final boss of the world and nothing else, and then after that, there is the end portal. These can either be a powerful enemy, or like the Forgotten Hall, a past story boss. For example, in World 4, the final boss is a buffed up variant of Gepard from the Belobog storyline. Throughout the simulated universe, after every battle, most occurrence encounters, and any mini-boss, or buying them from Herta, you can gain blessings. These work similarly to the boons in Hades as the closest example. These give you buffs, just in general, by buffing shields, follow-up attacks, crit damage, crit rate, so on and so forth. Each blessing follows a path, just like the characters, and each path will give a buff they focus on, just like the characters. For example, Elation focuses upon follow-up attacks, Preservation naturally focuses upon defense, Hunt is speed-based, Abundance is healing-based, etc. Now these stack over time, by the end of it you are godly powerful. A personal example is, since I main Jinyuan, I always pick the follow-up ones, the follow-up blessings, because they will always buff his follow-up attacks, making the Lightning Lord deal way more damage than usual. It's both very fun, but not ideal for showcasing characters, as the blessings make you way stronger than you should be. Hell, one of them just moves your turn order up by giving you more speed when you kill an enemy, and if your speed is already high enough, you will just get an extra turn. There's also path resonance attacks. These are basically mini ults that you can change depending on what path you pick at the start of your turn. All the ones I've used basically will just hit an enemy, every enemy on the field with a lot of damage. They charge after a set time, just like a normal ult will charge, and after a set time you can get a different bonus, like you get an extra charge of the ability, or you get a buff after using the Path Resonance skill. The other thing you can obtain through doing runs is curios. These are items. Sometimes they give you more blessings after a fight. They are like mini blessings, they can trigger effects when doing something. For example, with one curio, after getting a blessing after a battle will cause you to get another blessing, with the option between 2. After 2 uses, this curio will get destroyed. Another will revive characters to get fallen to their max HP, and then get destroyed afterwards, so on and so forth. Most of the stronger curios will always get destroyed after a set amount of uses, while the weaker ones will have unlimited uses, but that's not saying any of them are bad, they're just not as strong. There are also negative curios that will give you negative effects. These will give you a buff, but also a debuff, like taking away some of your max HP. Lastly, there are error code curios. These are broken, giving you a debuff until fixed. and when they're fixed, they give you a buff instead. For example, corrupted code. This takes 3 turns to fix, and when broken, characters lose energy when they perform a weakness break, but after it's fixed, they will gain energy when performing a weakness break. Basic gist of these are the curios that are broke, giving you a debuff, till fixed, when they'll give you basically the opposite of a debuff. The simulated universe also has a skill tree. You get these buffs over the course of completing worlds, and they are permanent buffs to things like attack, defense, or HP. Another detail is the weekly rewards. By completing worlds, you get a set amount of points that can be redeemed for rewards after you get a set amount of points, almost like a mini weekly season pass. You can get stuff like Stellar Jades, XP resources, Hertobons, which I haven't mentioned yet. Hertobons are a unique type of currency that's used to get things in her own store, which is accessed through the Simulated Universe menu. You can get 3 unique 5-star light cones, one for the hunt, one for the destruction, and one for the preservation, blending up with the 3 main starting characters, Dunhang being the hunt, March being preservation, and Physical Trailblazer being the destruction. You can get a special superimposer, which is used to superimpose purchased light cones from the store. I didn't mention it earlier, because I'm saving it more for the light cone section in character building, but superimposing is basically the same as refining something. You put it in to make the passive stronger. Lastly, you can also purchase wishes from the store, but I wouldn't advise doing that, as probably saving for the light cones is better. And with that, that is the first 3 parts I wanted to go over, concluding part 1. I hope you enjoyed this very different style of video, and if you did, I hope you look forward to part 2. Thank you for watching, and I'll try not to keep you waiting too long for part 2.